Welcome to Director's Circle, a podcast featuring insight from music educators and school leaders discussing their philosophies on the administrative leadership of a comprehensive music program. I'm Doug Conrad, and I'm coming to you live from my one-bedroom apartment in Western Maryland. Let's begin. Welcome to Director's Circle. I'm your host, Doug Conrad. Before we begin, I would like to thank you for listening to our show. If you are enjoying our episodes, please make sure to like our page on Facebook and to also subscribe to our show on iTunes and Google Play Music to stay updated on all future episodes. Today's guest is Mr. Scott Koter. Scott is a retired assistant superintendent for the Kiski Area School District in Vanguard, Pennsylvania, and has also served as their director of secondary education, principal, and director of bands. As band director, his ensembles have received numerous honors, including appearances at the Midwest Clinic, MENC, IAJE, and PMEA conventions, as well as being named as a Bands of America Grand National Class Champion twice. In addition to his work at Kiski, Scott is also currently serving as the program coordinator for the Santa Clara Vanguard Drum and Bugle Corps and has also served in the same position for the Cavaliers Drum and Bugle Corps. In 2015, Scott received the distinction of being inducted into the DCI Hall of Fame. Mr. Koter, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Glad to have you here. So to begin, if you could please tell us just a little bit about yourself and your professional background.
Okay, well, I grew up in a musical family. My dad was a musician and a teacher, played in the Air Force Band. Every night of the week, he was doing something. He taught the church choir at our church. He started a band at our church, and it was quite a big influence on me. He was a trumpet player and learned to play, or started playing percussion in the service when he had to play dance music, and I actually followed him in that regard too. I started on trumpet. Then in high school, I got a little bit more serious about percussion, and of course was a percussion major at Edinburgh University of Pennsylvania, and up in West Pennsylvania. So I got a music ed degree there. I got a master's equivalency at Duquesne University just in music ed things. And then I decided that I should, maybe expand my horizon. So I got a master's in administration from California University of Pennsylvania and a principal's certification or a principal's certificate. A couple years later, I was asked to go to central office, and then I said, okay, well, let me get my superintendent's letter of eligibility. I did all that at California University as well. I was 20 years as a band director. I started at a school district called Leechburg, which is right on the Kiskiminit River, and I crossed over the river into Kiski area. Kiski comes from Kiskiminitis, and was at the Kiski School District as the band director, high school band director, and taught some elementary and junior high lessons and classes in there, for 20 years. Then I became an assistant principal and got to oversee fine arts in the district. Started in the high school, did that for 6 or 7 years. Then I moved to the intermediate school, 7-8 building as the principal. Then moved to central office, director first of secondary ed, then director of K-12 instruction. And then finally I was commissioned officer, assistant superintendent in my last, 3 years. Retired in 2016, and although I love my time as administrator, I just really missed my passion for music, sharing that love, doing things like this, doing professional learning, growth, and designing.
Great. So a big thing for you coming up here in just a few weeks is that you were giving a presentation at the 2018 Midwest Clinic in Chicago. Could you please tell us a little bit about your presentation?
Yeah, I'm really excited. This is a true passion of mine, and basically, it stems from, although I spent 20 years in the classroom, I can honestly say I never learned as much about teaching and learning as I did in the 15 years I spent as administrator, and continue to learn. And with that, obviously a big advocate for music, for fine arts, for keeping that current, fresh, and viable in all schools. And realizing that my unique kind of perspective, still an active teacher, designer, clinician, along with that administrative background, that I could possibly offer some things to. Of course, Midwest Band and Orchestra is for band and orchestra directors. I thought that I had things to offer them in terms of using their principal as an ally, using their principal as a resource. And so with my background experiences, it's been a passion of mine and a goal to share some of my experience to advocate for band directors, for music educators of all types, especially those that are doing ensembles, and kind of an inside look at what principals know, what they think, obviously, what the research shows. Principals, administrators are professional learners as well. And it's, even though we don't, by the way, I took a different slant to this, so as you can see, but we don't often think about principals, administrators, anything but firemen or fire preventers, or is kind of figureheads. But their passion is student learning, and there's just so much to share there. So the name of my clinic is called Think Principal and Improve Your Program's Credibility and Effectiveness. And we're going to provide insight into really a little bit more of what principals do get their training in and what they're looking for. I know myself, when I would see, especially as a younger teacher, I would see my administrators walking across campus or into my neck of the woods in our part of the building where they didn't come very often. I think, man, who would ever want to do that? Or, I could not do that every day. Or, geez, it seems like they're always just putting out fires and dealing with disciplinary things. And even though that might be what you see, that's not necessarily what's happening. Principals, as I said, get a lot of training. They're consistently in learning situations where they're honing their skills. They're learning about latest research, analyzing data, observing, sharing, collegial exchange is really important. I think it's important that directors, music educators, get a little bit more of a glimpse, sort of like what's behind the curtain from the perspective as a fine arts person, as a music educator, especially somebody that's, still does it at a fairly competitive or high level. Not that that's important, where the stakes are somewhat higher, the expectations are high. Within that, we're going to touch upon a little bit of research, a little bit about learning, a little bit about school law, which we'll talk about probably here in a little bit. But also, we're going to talk about professional capital. Or credibility. As we know, capital is, your net worth, your earned credibility, your own credit. We want that more and more in life and everything we do. And as teachers, as educators, as directors, we're building that capital with our students, with our parents, with our community, with our administrators, with our school board, and with our peers and colleagues. And in some of my own professional learning, I've really been inspired, especially the last couple of years. We had a new superintendent at Kisk area that we really committed to being a functioning learning community. Oftentimes what happens is we get training as administrators. We say, teachers go do this. There's no follow-up. There's not ongoing, consistent usage and monitoring of that and feedback. And we did that. We discussed several books and opened our eyes to people like Rick DeFore, who was a pioneer of professional learning communities, or that aspect of schools, and then two other gentlemen, Hargraves and Fullen, Michael Fullen, Andrew Hargraves, and within this collegial learning community and this ongoing peer exchange, they use the term professional capital. And professional capital basically has three parts. It's human, and the human part is your own skills, your own talents, your own experiences, your diversity, your ability to communicate, all those type of things. Then there is the social part, and that's your willingness, your ability to share and to get others, build capacity, get others on board, work as a team, and things like that. And then of course there's excuse me. Then there's the decisional, and as teachers, as directors, we're always making decisionals, and it's that judgment. What do we do in this next situation? And that's reacting to a chord that's out of tune, or that's reacting to having to figure out how you're going to investigate or you get your administrators involved in the allegation of a theft in your instrument storage room. Those are just some of the things I'll be doing in my clinic.
Great. So now to talk a little bit about your work when you were the acting band director in Kiski. While you were the band director, your students had a lot of different experiences, whether it be performing at the Midwest Clinic as a guest group or even in the marching band spectrum being BOA national class champions. How did you build a program where students were able to perform at such high levels in multiple settings?
Well, I was blessed to get a position in the Kiski area school district in Western Pennsylvania. That was a flagship school district for music and a comprehensive music program. Outstanding elementary, really outstanding music appreciation, general music, really cutting edge vocal music, large amounts of kids participating I was just really blessed. There was such a tradition there. The gentleman, one of my mentors, Mr. Alex Costanza, and another one of my mentors, Mr. Mike Lamondola, they saw something in me. Alex Costanza actually retired, and he took an early retirement, which opened a position that allowed me to be hired by Mr. Mike Lamondola. And there was already a community that supported and loved music. The administration back then, and still does to this day, are staunch supporters of the arts, as is the board. There's a culture for music. It's ingrained in there. It's a viable part of what our students do, or what the students in Kiski area do. The percentage of kids participating in ensemble, even in a high school, is probably 25-30%. In the middle school, it's well over 70%. In elementary, it's nearly 100%. So I couldn't stress enough that I just was able to build upon what was there. Within that, there were things like convention appearances and parades and things like that. When I was hired, the superintendent at that time, Dr. Steve Vack, had a vision. He was actually from Eastern Pennsylvania, where marching band competition was a little bit more part of the culture out there. Actually, his own kids were coming up through the program too, but he thought that there was we might want to look into that. He basically gave me 10 or 12 things that his goals were, which I asked him in my interview. Things like he wanted to see the band. He thought it was good for the community and could be a flagship, which it certainly is. He wanted to see them on national TV parades. We did the Orange Bowl parade. We did, Citrus Bowl, things like that. We did Steeler games. We even sat in sub-zero temperature in a Pittsburgh Maulers game, which I'm not sure anybody knows who that is, but I think it was called the USFL. It was like a winter-spring version of NFL. Wasn't long-lived, but Pittsburgh had a team, and we played the first game, and we had some almost situations of frostbite, and most of our kids had snowballs thrown at them by the people that could afford to get into the Maulers game that couldn't get into the Steelers game. We didn't talk about like winning or necessarily performing at the highest level. It's certainly a prideful thing, but we never used any of that stuff as anything but a tool. Full transparency, any director has their own goals or their own milestones. So certainly having a band play at Midwest, having a band play at the IAG, JE, which used to be, an organization of jazz educators, convention in Eastern Part, and on, some of those milestones, just making the regional finals at a Bands America competition, let alone being a 7-time BOA Grand National finalist, or and winning championships. That's sort of beyond anybody's wildest dreams. Those obviously bring you credibility, you and the students, but that's not and we know the research is clear. It's not what people remember. They remember the excellence, but it's the things along the way. I guess the reason I share that with you is that was sort of my own tipping point of why why I sought out something more than just, I don't want to say just being a teacher, but I needed more information. I don't want to say the thrill, but I wasn't sure I could just reload every year a program. Okay, well, your band just did this, and they just played this, or we just played the Hindemith Symphony, or or Lincolnshire, or whatever your milestones and your bucket list things are. You're still getting those kids are coming in at the same level, learning the same things as you're growing and learning. And for me, I had at that time was a department chair and had a great group, and they still do, great group of teachers on the staff. Just the best we can get in the area, world-class players and teachers and composers and things like that. But what was missing was that forum for meaningful feedback and growth. And even though I know differently now, and I just talked a little bit about what principals know, back then I thought, well, the teachers need feedback on how to teach better so their kids can achieve more. So that was sort of the impetus for why I did that. Of course, now I know that what we were doing was great because we did have professional learning opportunities. We had biweekly meetings that were well attended, where we had demonstrations. One of my proudest moments was everybody bringing a secondary or tertiary instrument and playing those instruments in a setting, troubleshooting why somebody didn't sound good on this, even though they were a world-class player on something else. So, so I celebrate, and they still do. Kiski just won a regional. I don't know how many that is for them, a BOA regional, but it was the 30th anniversary of the first regional they won, which was 1988. Again, that's somebody else's opinion on where you belong competitively, but just to sustain that level of excellence, especially in unfunded mandates and budgetary constraints and attrition in teachers and change in demographics. I mean, obviously Kiski, like everywhere, their demographics have changed, particularly in the area. So it's really proud. I guess to sum this up on Kiski area and what was there, it was already a strong tradition and community support. There still is. It's centered on great teachers and centered on a blue-collar work ethic and family-oriented values, which still exist in the community, where parents are going to say, okay, you're going to do this, and you're going to rehearse a lot, and you're going to be upset with those guys because they're pushing you, but it's good for you. It's the right thing, and we embrace that.
Now, so to touch a little bit on how you kind of talked about some student motivation to get them to high levels of performance in each of those different ensembles, did you ever find any differences in how you approached leading students or motivating them to a high level of success in different ensembles, whether it be out on the marching field or in the concert hall?
Yeah, for sure. So I spent 7 years as assistant principal. Well, when I went to Kiski, fortunate, and they still do, there's still some team teaching and vertical teaching where you'd go down to either junior high or elementary. So I was, there were 3 concert bands in high school, and I had the, at that time it was called concert band. Now I believe they call it symphonic band. But I had the second band, and I had that second band, what we would term as a second band, for about 7 years. I loved it. I loved it because A, it was challenging, B, but creating that atmosphere for ownership, setting goals that they're not even sure that you don't even articulate to them in terms of the depth and breadth of literature or the kind of sounds you make, and we were learning together. Each year through going to festivals, hearing other groups, and if I wanted to hear a great band, I'd be able to go right down the hallway and pick the brain of the head director at that time, and the other directors in the district. So it was creating that culture, that community to have a great atmosphere, a great environment for learning, to give your very best. I used to have 3 roles, which were care, try, and pretend. I'm sort of embarrassed about that now, but the caring is like, if you care and you want to, and you try your very best, just about anything's possible. And the pretend part of that back then, when I was a young teacher, which will insert, I think all of us that now are up in age in terms of a number of years we've been doing this, I think all of us cringe a little bit of how we taught, what we knew, the manner in which we went about things back then. But it's a natural evolution. But the try part, the pretend part was, if you're not going to care and try, just don't disrupt the others that are going to be caring and trying. And what I learned is quickly that disappears when you're building relationships, you're creating ownership, and you're meeting the masses. Both on the podium, but more importantly, off the podium. So I share these techniques about that relationship building and catching people doing something right and all that, because that's always a springboard towards thinking outside the box, trying something you might not be comfortable on. Jazz program is still really strong. Kiski Jazz Band just played at the PMEA convention a couple years ago with Wayne Bergeron. Played in Midwest again a couple years ago. So there's that tradition. The same thing with improvisation, is creating that culture for, hey, here's your blank canvas, just paint. There's nothing wrong. And Kiski starts that in 6th grade. Actually, even a little ear to hand in 5th grade in some of the music appreciation classes. So it was sort of nurturing that environment. And then also within that, creating a little, I don't say competition, but friendly rivalry, either among sections or within, motivation to practice. What I found is, because those things were already ingrained with the students that would then move up to the top band. I was the marching band director, so I had all those kids, or just about all those kids, in marching band. Although marching band is an elective at Kiski, I like that aspect, if it possibly, because it's not for everybody, and especially in what I'd consider a smaller school district. I guess I celebrate the time that I had to not work harder, just smarter, and hone my skills as a teacher to get outcomes. It's easy if you stand in front of the best players, the most experienced players. I don't want to say it's easier, but you can do different things, but you still push them the same way.
Now, so to talk about some of your work with DCI, between 1999 and 2015, you served as the program coordinator for the Cavaliers Drum and Bugle Corps. Did you learn anything from this experience that you took back into your work as a music educator and administrator at Kiski?
Yes, for sure. I became an administrator with the Cavaliers. I was hired as a program consultant, and soon after moved into a leadership position, what they call program coordinator, which is leading the design team, leading that collaboration, working between the design team and the staff, particularly the caption managers, on the various captions of a drum corps, brass, percussion, color guard, visual. I was that liaison, goals, getting feedback, and impetus for ideas, certainly, but it was definitely a lot of serving and a lot of codifying or documenting. So I honed a lot of skills that kind of paved the way for me to say, you know what, I really do like this. And there's the thing about leadership, and it doesn't matter whether it's band or rugby or Boy Scouts. Leaders take people where they want to go, and people have to, sometimes by default or just because, they want to give back. They take leadership positions, which are great, and we're thankful they do. leadership fulfills a goal. But great leadership or amazing leadership are people that can take their students or those they lead where they never imagined they can go. And for me, in all my positions, I've had people that I aspire to be like that did that for me personally, that built my confidence and made me push a little further and try things I might not have. In that regard, I think some of that might have been a knack, or some of it, as my wife and daughter would call it, a little bit of a perfectionism syndrome, a little bit, but nonetheless, there's nothing more than getting a group of people in a room to be creative, to think outside the box, to let down the barriers, to listen and truly hear what somebody else is saying and consider it. I learned so much in those early years and continue to do in my leadership positions on design teams and the bands that I consult and coordinate for as well. There's three ways to make a decision, and I learned this before I could recite it. Use these three ways in just about any leadership position, whether it's a parent, you have a pet, or you're a superintendent, and anything in between. But the first way you make a decision is you command. Hey, I'm the boss. I need you to do this, and oftentimes you need to do it, and it's not militaristic. There's just sometimes, as raising your children. Okay, I need you to do your homework. Well, I don't want to do my homework. Okay, fine. You don't have to do your homework, but you're not going to get ice cream. So, so you have to command. Sometimes you consult, and that's when you want to either get a feel or you want to get build a confidence or validation. So the consultation part of that is you kind of get a feeler for what's out there, or those you respect, trust, or build professional capital with you, so to speak. And then you kind of take that information, and then you still make the decision based on your best judgment along with that information. And of course, the last part, the last one in that three ways of making decision is consensus. This is one that I didn't know a lot about. I knew it existed, but I was confused. I think a lot of people are confused about consensus. For our administrative team at Kiski, particularly the last couple of years, we talked about building consensus and what that means, and we talked about group norms of how to be a viable, collaborative, listening, nurturing, meaningful group, and we kind of had to define that consensus thing. And the best way now that I could articulate what consensus is consensus is when the will of the group's been heard. You've entertained all enough thoughts. The will of the group's been heard, and it's obvious what direction it is to go. That doesn't mean it was unanimous. That just means the will of the group has been heard, and it's obvious which direction to go. And as you can see, with my kind of articulation and sort of like spitballing of all these things, my worlds do collide, because I don't think right now. When I guest conduct or go into work with a band, and stand on a podium in front of the kids, I don't think I separate some of those key leadership tools or devices or procedures, so to speak. Whether, again, we're trying to get a B flat major chord, get the fifth in tune a little bit more before we add the third in, or whether we're trying to polish or produce something that's very skeleton on the field. And so I guess in closing with that, there were so many talented, smart, diverse, unique backgrounds of musicians and industry people and designers in these rooms. The amount of professional learning it helped that I gained from that experience within the Cavaliers and now at the Vanguard, and anytime I collaborate with teachers, is it's sort of like my playing poker or my birdie in golf. I'm not a golfer after some back surgeries and things like that, so it keeps me coming back.
So, in addition to your work with the Cavaliers, you also currently serve a role as the program coordinator for the Santa Clara Vanguard. Can you please tell us a little bit about your role with that organization?
Yes. So I did almost 18 years with the Cavaliers. absolutely love the group. I'm working with the two dream organizations, or have, and I'm presently working with them because the vision, the mission of the organizations, and the people involved. Cavaliers, just class people. So many of the founders of that organization are still around and learned. And I just bought into what it is that it meant to be a Cavalier, and what they were putting on the field, their product. Having said that, when I was first became interested in drum corps, I didn't know what it was. I heard it on an 8-track tape at a color guard show, of which my friends and I went to meet young ladies and support our high school winter guard. Had no idea. I heard this thing playing on an 8-track recording. I didn't know what it was, and it was very unique. The fidelity wasn't great, but to me it was like I was in a concert hall in Vienna. It just sort of rocked my world, and I ended up buying an 8-track, and on it were 2 years of Santa Clara Vanguard and a couple other drum corps. I played it so much I wore it out. At that, they were an innovator. They played orchestral music, kind of modern, contemporary. And the reason I share that, it was just sort of like a goal. So I retired from Cavaliers. It was certainly, I had a great experience there. It was time for somebody else. Definitely a new direction for them, and thinking I need some time away. But the day after DCI finals, I was honored, had a few offers, and Vanguard was one of them. And I thought, it's been a dream. And once I started asking questions and learned a little bit more about the vision, the current state of the Corps, what their goals are, and I knew that they had a community. They have 2 drum corps. They have what they call an open class corps, who won open class championships last year and ended up being 18th at world semifinals. They have brass band, they have percussion ensemble, they do outreach things for, like, even the San Jose Sharks. They've done Super Bowl things. They just did a performance at the college football playoffs, which the finals are going to be in Santa Clara. And they have so many things there. They have vision of a winter guard. They have a winter guard. They have, they have clinics and workshops. There's so many things. And there was a strong vision for what they were giving their students, what they wanted from the organization, what the expectation was, and, being a viable part of the community, and what they're instilling in the kids. So long story short, at first I thought against my better judgment because I needed some time off. But soon after, sort of like riding a bike, I get in the room with, brilliant people, again, in that first year, people that I hadn't really collaborated with. And it just was like, it was inspirational. Just felt in my zone, and again, sometimes change of scenery is good. So it was probably a little bit of that. So enjoyed that collaboration. And then, within a time, it started the need to replace some individuals that were, not going to be coming back. And then I started calling some of my colleagues from the Cavaliers in those days, particularly, Michael Gaines, first Andy Toth, and then Michael Gaines, and brought them on the team. So it's, in some ways, from the design standpoint, it's sort of like getting the band back together, but also working with Paul and Sandy Reddick, who are just rock star teachers, percussion professors. Of course, J.D. Shaw, just a brilliant musician, arranger, and French horn soloist. Working with Michael Rosales, who has done choreography for hip hop artists, and he's been on the stage with people like Janet Jackson and J Lo. It's just it's amazing. So now that I'm in the room with some people that we're still relatively new and working together, with some people we're pretty comfortable about, we're becoming even more pliable. And things like that. My goal and what my role is a facilitator for creativity, and a facilitator to get that creativity on paper and eventually out on a football field, which is, I guess it's like a producer and a director of a movie or a Broadway show. And sometimes easier said than done. Sometimes it's challenging. there are deadlines. Actually, right before this call, I revisited the Pixar Story, a movie about how Pixar got started and broke off from Disney and that whole process. And it's almost 2 decades old now, I believe. And how they would, if they weren't quite ready to put a movie out or weren't quite ready to get to that next level, they wouldn't. Obviously, the first 5, 6, 7 films that Pixar, produced were just blockbusters, and one kept outdoing the other. Well, in any creative venue, in particular, in marching arts, pageantry, whether it's indoor guard or football field stuff, you have that luxury and you have that environment, but you also have these deadlines. You have, although there are formative and summative assessments, formative assessment for us would be like our own opinion of, or what we're seeing on a video or what we're seeing in a run through at the end of rehearsal. When you're performing in public for people, particularly at a competition or a contest, that's a formative assessment and a summative assessment. So a formative assessment means we're tasting the soup, see how it tastes, so that we know what we need to do to it to the next time it goes out. It's a better version of that soup. With the summative being your championships or your ultimate performance at the end of your season. When a Broadway show goes out, it's opening night, the director still gives notes, but it's pretty fleshed out. That's not the case in marching band and drum corps because, we're performing in early September. The whole show's not out there. It's early, or the confidence is there. I like that part about it, but that's sort of the rub and the complicating thing when you're coordinating a program, especially of creative people who are sometimes not always timeline people. The people I work with are though they get timelines and things like that. But what we don't do, and for marching band directors, listening to this, what I may have maybe in my first year or two, and just realizing that it was the wrong thing to do and it was disrupting the creative process. But I'm not bugging people to say, hey, where's this new widget? Where's this new creative thing day after day? There has to be some patience. And something that applies to everything is the golden triangle rule. You can have there's 3 things and you can only have 2 of them. In this case, you can have something good, you can have it fast, or you can have it cheap, but you can only have 2 of those things. When you want to perform at the highest level, and again, it doesn't matter what the venue, whether it's an elementary choir or whatever, you need patience. You need to nurture. You need to know when to step in and guide. You need to, as I call it, you need to push, pull, or nudge, which are good leadership kind of lingo there too.
So with all of the different areas you oversee, how do you and the Vanguard staff coordinate the design and performance growth for your show in such a short amount of time, with especially drum corps where during the tour season may only be a few months?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. Technology integration and usage is a really important one, just like we're doing this podcast right now. But we have some face-to-face meetings. We're also prudent, so when we have face-to-face meetings, it's oftentimes in conjunction with something else. Whether it saves time, money, resources, costs. It's expensive to fly people around the country and get together. It's a youth activity. It's nonprofit. It's not the Pixar officials flying somewhere to brainstorm something. So, we do that. We have weekly calls, and sometimes we don't need them or don't use them if there's nothing to report, but they're check-ins. Sometimes just little milestones, little like benchmarks, just say, okay, what'd you find about this? Or now that you've had a week to think about it, whatever. So we have those about once a week. We have done video calls, Skype, or in our case, FaceTime, or GoToMeeting. We've done that a little bit. We try to be in the same place a couple times a year, all of us at the same time. And then other times, whether it's be shows or rehearsals, other times we strategically are not all there at the same time. And that's good because then somebody could be home doing something both personally or professionally in other walk of life, but somebody could be the boots on the ground to interpret that, get a feel for that. And of course, we use the caption heads and other people that are there. There's daily videos that are uploaded to a Facebook page. There are daily recordings made all through for every camp, and then also pre-tour. Pre-tour is our band camp. Just happens to be about a month long of basically 12 hours a day, 10 to 12 hours a day. So we use those. It's assessment. It's constant assessment with music notation software and MIDI playback and things like that. It's easy to replicate and share things in real time, and it's even as easy as sometimes a great friend and guy that I work with, Mike McIntosh, would sometimes just take the nearest napkin or piece of paper and write a lick on it and take a photo of it and text it to somebody and said, here's the change for bar 72 to make this more playable. I guess the ways to communicate are endless. A lot more in the planning. And then there's a lot of workshopping, particularly for people that saw Vanguard last couple of years in the integration of props. But sometimes it's when you're creating, you need that what we call laboratory time or workshopping time. And people would be surprised at our camps. We're not honing the music as much as we're trying things. So whether it be a certain style music or a certain dance technique, or in the case of using props or sets or devices, how many counts does it take if we push this thing from here to here, and how many people does it take to do it? You really need to do that before you get it right on paper. Now, you can do it the other way and just kind of do it in real time, but when time is of the essence, that can be a time waster. Sometimes you have to do it, no different than a choreographer, blocking out or staging, doing choreography for a scene in your high school musical. So there's a little bit of that goes on. Now with technology, you instantly get the judges' tapes for every contest, and you can listen to them. You can listen to them in real time. There are post-contest critiques that you can hear. You can actually then, for those off the road, can either give information or pose questions to those going into the critique, get clarification on something or to make a point with somebody. Not that there's necessarily gamesmanship when you're talking to judges. So it's endless, but as you can see, probably a lot of it is technology driven. And a lot of it is just being tight on the opportunities you do have to collaborate, that you do in fact meet those timelines that are there in mind and body, if that makes sense.
Great. So, having worked with two world-class organizations, both the Cavaliers and Vanguard, did you notice any similarities between your early years working with both organizations?
Yes, if I think back of it, there's now well over 20 years since my first Cavalier experience to where I am now with Santa Clara Vanguard. But yes, there are similarities. The difference, though, is my own experiences, my own knowledge. All that I've gained as a administrator, as a leader of teachers, as a advocate for learning, from research to collegial exchange to all those things. So I now know to trust the process a little bit more. So yeah, the situations are similar. You debrief on the previous year, you set goals, for the upcoming year. And then you start to create. You start with a blank canvas. You just brainstorm. You spit out ideas. You just paste things on the wall. You don't even have to worry what sticks, what doesn't. That process is the same. What is different is just my experiences, my confidence in knowing. Sometimes you just got to let it out there. You don't have to always get to an end game or a certain point. You don't shoot holes in any idea, especially in the opening stages of creativity. You don't do that. And we in archive, I'm just different. I'm further along. I've learned a lot of things. What to do, what not to do. I was speaking to Michael Gaines, and the visual designer for the Vanguard, and he just did a clinic in Japan, and his clinic was basically on design, creativity, visual nuance, things like that. And there were going to be a lot of questions on the product that he just produced, and we just collaborated on at Santa Clara Vanguard. So he was able to go to the Google Doc, which is a running document that we archive. And I've been doing this, not in Google Docs, but in some way, or some sort of Word document for at least the last 12 or so years. But in the early years, we didn't do it. So now this Google Doc, obviously, everybody can see it. It's just an archive, and a painting that's inspiring, or a costume, or a link to a video or something that's on there. So he was able to go to 2007, it would have been 2018's document, which started in the fall of 2017, and just look through that document and kind of refresh his memory on how we got to where we got there, and what are the things we said we wanted to do, what did we roll out, what was the process, and things like that. It was really helpful. That's another example of the use of technology and archiving and things like that. The other thing, and again, it's another technological thing that we didn't have we had texting, obviously, but now we use an app called Slack, which is just an organizer, and you can have you can do direct messaging in it, and you can have channels for different departments. There are schools that I'm sure use it and things like that. Any organization can use it. Sports teams use it. Apps just like that. But what we'll do is during the week, sometimes when we're on a meeting together, it just happens to be phone, because we have people in all parts of the country, some in cabs, some in airports, things like that. You can't always do a video conference and hold something up to see it. But what we can do is in real time put the video up there, or put it right on Slack. Everybody sees it and they go, oh, that's what it is, or whatever. Or later on we can do it. So, I guess this, in terms of comparing the two, the process is the same. Wisdom, experience changes, kind of what tools are available to you changes, but there's really no substitute for, the goal is to be as creative as possible, to give the students, the best product and the most creative, innovative, and worthy product possible, and then give the support to the tools of the teachers. And in this case, I guess, like a drum corps show, the written product is, I guess, the curriculum, the curriculum guide, the scope and sequence, so to speak, and the teachers deliver that. I guess short answer, not much different, just times are different.
Now, to switch perspectives on this a little bit, having had worked as an administrator for 16 years, how has that impacted your own teaching and design work today?
Oh my gosh. A ton, especially from the teaching aspect. And, I'm a leader of leaders. I'm a leader of teachers and designers. And there's always a tipping point for us where there can either be an intimidation factor involved. I can remember going in, and there's so many other models for supervision of teachers, and quite honestly, most are more effective than the clinical model of going in, a couple obligatory visits in the classroom, writing what you see, and then giving a couple obligatory, hey, you might think about this. Nonetheless, that was the model that even when I started as administrator, that was still being used and was in vogue and would do that. So imagine, here's me as a band director, music teacher, going in to observe a physics class of which I didn't take in high school. I knew which path I was going. I was going to be like my dad and be a teacher, so I took astronomy my senior year. Not saying it was going to be easier. I just was interested in the stars and the planetarium. But nonetheless, I would go in and observe that, and they would be doing something on, laws, laws of motion or something, like that. And, there I am trying to digest it all. I couldn't understand the theory, things like that. But I just got over that. And it's no different when you're leading and teaching. Well, teaching students, leading students, and leading teachers and designers. At some point, and probably my judging skills honed this a little bit. At some point, I had to get over the fact that when I'm talking to the very best designers and teachers in the marching arts activity, that I didn't have to do it at the same level I don't have to be able to do that. My skill is to be able to communicate, to acknowledge, and just give reactions. I didn't have to always solve the problems, but as long as I identified something that might not be quite right in performance or in design or in pacing, even if I got confident enough to say, okay, well, here's probably a stupid solution, but you might try this. And through that kind of like unfiltered, relaxed conversation, at least led to additional conversation and critique, or at least let them solve the problem. Maybe what I shared wasn't the right remedy, but at least it led them to that. And the reason I share that is that's the same way I approach everything, particularly leading teachers and designers. Now with the students, the negative about 16 years as administrator is I'm not working directly with students on a daily basis. And it's something that, I guess, I'm still, I have many more opportunities now than I did when I was assistant superintendent, obviously. And of course, people invite me in to talk to the class, and especially the music teachers would always invite me in. But, I just, relish those moments more. And there's things that, now that I know, like my daughter came home from kindergarten first day, and we said, okay, what did you think your first day, and what do you think Mrs. C, her teacher, thought of you on your first day? And she said, well, Mom, Dad, she said I do good zip lips and bug eyes. And we said, zip lips and bug eyes, what do you mean? And she just closed her mouth, looked up with open eyes, and the point to that was being attentive and responsive and all eyes on me and listen. And, and sometimes we think in the classroom it needs to be organization, there needs to be discipline, there needs to be systemness, there needs to be, it needs to be scripted and on point and things like that. And yes, at times it does, but learning is messy. It's by nature a messy thing. And, just because all the kids aren't looking at you right in the eye, or even if they might be saying something under their breath or even talking to their neighbor, doesn't mean it's a sign of disrespect. And the reason I say these things out loud is, myself and many of us experience teachers and music educators would say, boy, those are things that were near and dear to us early in our career that doesn't matter anymore, or we know differently. I'm part of the clinic that I'm doing at Midwest will focus on, like sort of research things, but learnings of the most effective practices, the most engaging classrooms I've been in, which have been sometimes the most chaotic, observably really unfocused. You're not seeing them produce anything. There's not an observable outcome, but yet the impact on these kids, on the students and what they're able to create is just masterful. So through all that experience that I gained through watching rock star teachers and colleagues, now when I get in front of kids, it's not like, zip lips and bug eyes, look at me, I'm the boss. And it's certainly not like, there's only one opinion that matters right now, it's mine. That's not it. It has to be problem solving, and it doesn't have to be ask a question and one person raise their hand and get the answer. That yes, that's an informal way to assess people, but it's not really a realistic one. There's many other things that can be done. As you can see, I'm really passionate about those things because I think you can have it all. You never have it all. You never have the ideal situation. Always wanting, you're always looking to hone your craft and push students to go further than ever gone before. But you can have outstanding music ensembles, performing ensembles at any level, and you can make an impact on the students, and you can also give them the skills that truly are needed 5, 25, and 50 years from now. And the impetus, again, for my passion about thinking like a principal and thinking more about learning and thinking more about collaboration and outside the box tactics, so to speak, is because I've been in the band rooms of some of the finest bands in the country, at one time or another, in front of some of the finest performers. Even some of them, in Kiski area, are world-class symphony players and on and on and on. But when I'm in there, especially a lot of groups that maybe are playing at a level that most college ensembles would aspire to be like, that in some way, if you would ask them about what do you think the composer's intent is here on the bridge of this song, and they truly look at their shoes or don't make eye contact because they don't know how to answer that question. And that's not a cut on directors who are getting kids. And I say kids more than students, and just because, that's just, I guess, from where I am, and it's really a sign of respect because they're just kids, and we're all just kids at heart. But what I don't say what concerns me, but what is it that we want these kids to know and remember 5 years down the road? Do we want them to be identify a song that has the same chord changes as Pachelbel's canon, or we just want them to play Pachelbel's canon in tune, in time, and with some dynamic expression? I mean, we want it all, right? And I think the genius of the and part of that, which is play at the highest level or perform at the highest level, but it's also analyze and use critical thinking and problem-solving skills and bring other forms of assessment and creativity in, and discuss that, so that 25 years from now, when you can't make an embouchure because maybe your teeth that you don't have anymore are not quite right, you can still do all those things. And there's so many ways to do that. That's truly my passion. That's the impetus for my clinic. That was my aha moment of why I said, I have the opportunity here to retire. I'm in a good place in life. The time is right because my passion is fine arts and music. My passion is students. And my passion is, in some ways, making sure that directors don't make the mistakes that I have, but their eyes and ears are open a little bit more to stuff that they may not get in their normal situation when they're in their music wing of their school, where they hardly ever see administrators, hardly ever see colleagues, and are doing their classes, they're doing their duties, and then they're doing something on their prep period and coming in early and leaving late, because that's what music educators do. Just similar to yourself, that are getting ready for an upcoming concert.
Great. So now to wrap up our interview, we're going to go over just a few questions we have asked all of our guests. So in your career as a leader of programs as well as an administrator, what leaders have inspired you in your career, and what lessons have you taken from them?
There's so many. I'd hate to list or say any or too many, just because I didn't want to slight anybody. But as a young judge, I soon after becoming judging, worked my way into an administrative position as a judge coordinator for Drum Corps International. And I was in the room with brilliant teachers, designers, administrators, composers, things like that had a passion for the activity, and were put in a leadership position of judging, of supervising judges, about the system of judging, and collaborating with instructors and designers. And so I guess the two gentlemen that come to mind are Ken Turner and Jay Kennedy, both well-respected judges and designers, educators. Jay's still working at Berkeley as associate dean, and Ken Turner's, was teaching in Johnson City, where he worked in the school district, was one of the pioneers of outcomes-based education. Those two gentlemen. My first drum instructor in Drum Corps was and still is a big mentor and influence on me. His name is Mike Coomer. He was the dean of the School of Music for Duquesne at many years. Then he finished his career in higher ed as the leader of a nonprofit education division of Duquesne. Still has his own nonprofit consulting business. We talk and get together as frequently as he can, not as much, but just a gentleman that has wisdom beyond belief and is dedicated to learning himself and growing, and taught me, along with Jim Campbell, who taught me, he's the University of Kentucky percussion guy that taught me when I marched Drum Corps. Those two gentlemen particularly said teaching is teachers. first and foremost. If you want to have exemplary learning, you hire exemplary teachers, and then you nurture them and stay out of the way, let them do their job. Another gentleman, Dr. John Shaner, was the principal near the end of my teaching career before I made the transition to administration. I actually took a sabbatical, went to Japan, did some teaching and touring, and that's when I also got my principal certificate. He was an advocate for me. He saw something in me, and that's those people that see something in us, that spark, that have that relationship, that can push, pull, nudge if they need to, bring us back to earth, keep us centered, pat us on the back, praise in public, criticize in private, all those things. Just a gentleman, when he walked into a faculty meeting, and I had several years in already, and he stood in front of the faculty, and within seconds, it was like seeing like a unicorn, or seeing a Moby Dick, to be honest with you, because it was different than I had seen in terms of just ability to command respect, show respect for us, create an environment of relaxation and transparency. So those are just just some of the many people that have inspired me and still continue to inspire me.
What are 3 words you would use to describe an outstanding leader of a comprehensive music program? Passion, or being passionate, tenacity, and being resourceful. I think those 3 characteristics are ones that I aspire to subscribe to the most. But I think at the end of the day, when you're passionate about students, when you're passionate about music or fine arts, and you're passionate about learning and about taking those students to a place they never imagined they could go, or do or perform, it's amazing. When you're passionate about something, the pitfalls, the crises, the failures, the near misses, they don't last very long. The passion comes back, and the dedication there. And all the years I interviewed teachers, you look for passion, tenacity, that never give up, thinking of Jimmy V, never give up, but tenacity to not, tenacious approach that what's the core mission, and it's students achieving at the highest level possible, right? With that, it's going to take a great deal of tenacity, figuring out a way. It's like that primitive video game Donkey Kong, where you climb up the ladders until you'd hit something you couldn't. You'd have to climb back down, go over a different ladder, and hope go up. That's good for visual imagery for tenacity, because if the mission is to get to the top floor, highest level, then you need tenacity and resourcefulness, particularly in today's day and age. When with budget constraints and high stakes testing and unfunded mandates and all the distractors and things that happen, you still need to get students to achieve at the highest level. You need to figure out ways to do it. It's one of the key teachings and focuses when I work with teachers of any age in professional development situation, is you find out a way to make it work. So I think it would be passion, tenacity, and resourcefulness. Great. So now to tie into a little bit to your response of resourcefulness, with current trends in education, what advice would you give to music educators to help their students thrive regardless of location or school status?
Set high standards. Don't compromise your standards. You may have to tweak or modify some of the approaches and things like that. But you still set high standards, and students are individual learners. The difference is, in a math class, everybody takes their own assessment. In performing arts or music classes, ensembles, we put our classes. Everybody's out there. Everybody's a starter. Everybody has to participate in that in that assessment. So to not compromise, don't sell yourself short or the students short just because of time, money, help, things like that. There's still a way. It comes back to that tenacity. So the resourcefulness comes in of again, what's your core mission? And don't feel you have to know it all or do it all. One of the key things I did for the many years that I was jazz ensemble director, especially of the top jazz ensemble, I would bring people in to help do some sectionals, or I would rehearse at different times to do sectionals. But obviously so many outstanding players have come through that program for the last 50 years. But I developed a confidence, even if I didn't think that the section leader or the veteran leader was maybe the best model in terms of sound or interpretation or teaching or communication. If they were the leader, they conducted sectionals. And it was a leap of faith to do that. The reason I share that is it was amazing what the kids, when they came back in, I don't know what transpired. I would walk in sometimes and, just kind of pop in to see, but I didn't want to stifle. But the things that they were accomplished and how they did that, who knows? It could have been, everybody picking up the slack a little bit, making a suggestion. What about this? What about that? And, smart, talented kids in leadership positions inherently know to collaborate with others. The resourcefulness that we don't use enough in music classes, performing art, is the collaborative aspect. Creating situations where even in a room of chaos, when you have 90 kids in a choir band, it'd be hard. But something as easy as turn and talk, or turn and discuss with your neighbor, or let's listen to this and see what you think, or or whatever. Those opportunities to collaborate and problem solve and exchange. That's just one example of resourcefulness. Another one is, you don't have money. Schools are not replacing teachers and things like that. But actually, years ago, for the PMEA notes, the Pennsylvania Music Educators, their journal, I wrote an article on, supplementing your band program using outside resources, and it was everything through inviting the local artists to come in to do master classes and little clinics and things like that. Most often they wanted nothing, or maybe just give them a T-shirt. Most would do it for nothing. Contacting university for students, invite them in, especially ones in early stages of music ed classes. Of course, student teachers and on and on and on. If you can't, starting scholarship programs through booster programs and things like that, grants. There's still ways to supplement and be resourceful. And the last resourcefulness tidbit I'd share, and I've done this as just a full-blown professional development workshop, is using assessment and various means of assessment, and including technology and creativity to improve your ensemble. Oftentimes, you go into a lot of schools, particularly in areas like Texas, where the paradigm is, they might be on a block schedule or a modified block, 4 classes a day, or even if they have 8 classes a day, there are kids, there are 10, 12 practice rooms, and there are teachers in every one of those practice rooms. And on that day, the kid has a lesson, they just go out there. The students pay the teacher, the districts approve that. It's a great way to do that. Well, not everybody has the resources. At Kiski, we had no space. But we still, to this day, there are three guys, 3 teachers in the 7th grade band and the 8th grade band at the intermediate school. And sometimes they're team teaching within the building, or they're taking turns. Sometimes they're maybe splitting up. Sometimes they're going to the uniform storage room or a practice room, or a hallway, because it's in an area where noise doesn't matter, so much. There's always a way. I've seen too many directors, and this is one of the things I'll stress in my clinic coming up in Midwest, say, well, we can never do that, or we tried that, it doesn't work. I always liken teaching somebody else's kids, our students in our school district or on ensembles, whether it's a community group or otherwise, to our own children, or our own pets, or whatever we're in control with. You're going to continue to try to do your best to make sure that your own kids have what they need, are going to be safe and secure and nurtured. Well, it should be no difference when the kids you're teaching. And when we sort of give up, or we can't do that, or try, or I have a hall duty now so I can't teach kids, or I have to do cafeteria, or I've been covering a lot more study halls than I ever have. truth be told, I early in my career was the same way until I found my tipping point. And after 16 years as an administrator, I can say with even more full heart and voice that that's the way you build that professional capital or credibility, is doing those things that others might seem beneath them or a distractor or keeping them from their core mission. When you do those things that are either unpleasant or not right necessarily within your job description, people owe you. They're going to go to the wall for you, and it's going to pay back in spades. And what's the end game? Not a money, not a raise, not a positive rating. It's going to benefit your students.
Great. So for our next question, if possible, if you could answer from two perspectives, one as a director and then also from the viewpoint of an administrator. So what does success look like to you when you think of a comprehensive music program?
Success is diversity. Success would be viable experiences in performing, creating, listening, improvising, and just an overall dedication to making music with the highest standards, while also giving kids opportunity for critical listening and for critique and for sharing and collaboration. It again, doesn't matter the ensemble, doesn't matter the size of the class, it doesn't matter the venue. You can do those things when you're creating viable experiences. And a lot of areas of the country, I believe Maryland, is one of them. There's a lot of kids participating in solo ensemble festivals. That's the biggest thing. And if you're in an area of the country where you don't have that opportunity or you couldn't get to something like that, create your own. At Kiski, we would do an end of the year kind of solo and ensemble recital, and it would be, there'd be kids that, for the first time getting up, or kids that would decide to do some things on their own. Then you had other groups that, had been working together. Those things go a long way. So taking advantage of smaller settings, one-on-one or small group even within a large ensemble setting. I think successful groups, you're seeing a diversity of literature. I mean, you're viable. You have to do things that are appealing to kids and audiences. There's a commercialism. Again, early in my age, thinking, well, I'm not going to play that. That's not quality literature. And I'm here to tell you, just about all literature is viable if it's approached the right way, especially if it's soundly written. But the standpoint, there's as much to learn from a Lady Gaga song as there is, in a whole suite. And you don't have to do one or the other. You can do both. You don't necessarily need to all the time, but you should. You should touch upon all those things. I think a truly successful program, or something that's a part of successful programs, from my perspective, is jazz, rock, pop as part of what is delivered, what opportunities are for the students. It's an American art form. The articulation, the stylistically interpretive things are really important. That's what we listen to on the radio. It needs to be viable, and the ability, the experience of improvising is key. There's really no art form we can, really can claim here in the good old United States of America as much any art form actually as we can about jazz, rock, pop. So whether you're able to do it only before school one day a week, or you're able to get it as a class and also jazz combos and a class in improvisation, it doesn't matter as long as it's there. I think to not have an experience at all doesn't. My personal opinion is it might be a void. And again, it comes to that big idea, essential teachings. What is it these students are going to remember? We want them going to hear the symphony and to hear, and we want them hearing venues, maybe, hearing a full blown choral work somewhere. But the reality is there's a better chance the kids are going to be going to a Garth Brooks concert, or at least watching it on TV like we did just a couple days ago, from good old Notre Dame Stadium. I think also, some sort of music theory, some sort of music composition or music technology, opportunities to integrate, opportunities to create, opportunities to apply. Not just, we have these classes, we have these progressive bands, and the more experienced the band, the more difficult the literature. That's good too, but we can have it both. It doesn't have you don't have to make choices. You can do that both without losing rehearsal time and without losing excellence.
Great. So now to wrap up, could you speak a little bit about how, more particular to your work at Kiski, how would you like to be remembered as a leader of the Kiski School District and community, all the way from your work as a director, all the way through your work as an administrator?
Okay, great questions. As I said, I was at Kiski for 34 of my 36 years, so I sort of cringe or look the other way sometimes when I think about what I did, said, and how I approached things as a young person. But I weathered the storm, as did the community and the teachers, and nothing more rewarding than having students of students. I didn't start Facebook until after I retired, and the most rewarding thing are reconnecting with students and parents and those that you've interacted with. So I would hope I'd be remembered as firm, fair, and consistent. I think the basic things. I had high standards, but the proven results based on, again, not a trophy or a placement or a convention appearance so much as just that feeling when you were in the zone and the performance went great, or we accomplished something we didn't know. I would like to think that I righted wrongs. A key, especially later, Stephen Covey's son wrote a book called The Speeds of Trust. One of his strengths, another great book that I just read is called Extreme Ownership. It's written by Navy SEAL commanders and now do a lot of teaching. But it's sort of righting wrongs or apologizing or admitting mistakes. I think I learned that pretty early because I was at least intuitive enough when I might have lost a room or lost a kid. And sometimes, I think that human factor of good basic character with good intentions, not always the right way. Hopefully, as I got on in my career in different areas, I still had that learning curve and acclimation, but I think the core student-centered, doing what's right for kids, showing them excellence, showing them that hard work does pay off. I think some would say uncompromising in my expectation, perfectionism, things like that. But status quo was never an option. It still is not an option for me. I'm learning, especially here in my senior age here, that it doesn't have to be obsessive about it. You have to smell the roses. You have to celebrate success. You have to be in the moment. But I think that would be it. I think I was an advocate for all students. Admittedly, music kids, generally the ones that are in ensembles, are your best of your best. And even though, maybe not everybody's achieving and taking every AP class, they're still your best. They're still character and commitment and things like that. And so I took that for granted as a teacher, even in my latter years of teaching. When I became administrator, especially the first couple of years as assistant principal, I'm having to work with the kid on discipline that obviously the discipline's not working, not because they're disrespectful or anything like that. It's just realizing that, everybody's in a different place in life and what their situation is. But the common thing is treating students with respect, looking out for their well-being, being sincere. What I have known is oftentimes in life, particularly high flyers, what I call high flyers, the kids that will just jump through the hoop to get what they need to get for their resume, for their, for whatever their credibility and credit they're trying to develop. But the kids that go to wall for you are sometimes the kids that struggled the most, or you had to get on their back the most for or with. But I think I was an advocate for all students at all level. I would hope to be definitely resourceful, not accepting status quo, figuring out some sort of new angle to keep excellence at the forefront, even when the rug's pulled out or things are changed around. Definitely a change agent. I'd like to think just about everything that I've been involved with, particularly Kiski area, where I left it was, I won't say better, but definitely expanded and enriched from where it was. I guess the other thing is, this would be as much advice for educators of any age is, I always vowed that I would, and near the end of my, public school career, say kids are not the same, teachers are not the same, things like that. And kids are exactly the same. Kids were challenging their parents and challenging society and being, resourceful and creative and sneaky and all that. They've been doing that since the beginning of mankind. What's different is society, but that's no different than our grandparents were saying and what they saw and how it changed from them, and what kids have available and technology, and who knows what they're going to be saying 25, 30 years from now. We're saying the kids don't look up from their computer screen or their iPhone, but kids are kids, and it's the same, and parents are the same too. I used to think that parents that were involved or asserted opinions were pushy, but then you spend X amount of years as an administrator and you realize, hey, any parent that's involved with their kid and offers opinion at least wants to advocate for the kids, even if you feel they're doing the wrong thing or going about the wrong way, at least they're involved, because for every what we would call helicopter or pushy parent there are 25,000 that could care less or don't even know what's going on, and not even giving the kids the basics like a roof over their head and food and comfort and security. And I would like to, I'd like everybody, I would think people would remember that I was a lifelong learner, devoted to growth myself, finding new ways of doing things, and even here in my new roles as a consultant and clinician and designer, and I adjudicate anything that I'm doing that's mostly music and fine arts related. I love learning new things, and I love having that be. I use the analogy of Post-it notes or Velcro. I Velcro food to my stomach because that's where it seems to go when I eat it. But when I get ideas or something I can use from somebody through collaboration, through observation, through some sort of exchange, I literally get the Post-it note, write it, and put it on my brain somewhere. So I think that would be some of the basic things.
Wonderful. So, Scott, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today and sharing your insight, and best wishes to you in your upcoming presentation at the Midwest Clinic.
Thanks so much, Doug. Thanks for having me. Thanks for allowing me to pontificate and get on my soapbox and be a little bit scattered. I pray to God I will be lucid enough and present enough of mind and body as long as forever, that I can show that enthusiasm for learning and music.
This concludes our episode. Many thanks to Scott Koter for sharing his valuable insight as an administrator and music educator. Please make sure to like us on Facebook and to also share our episodes with others on social media. This is Doug Conrad saying thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in to the next edition of Director's Circle.